I'm going to ask everyone to please go on mute if that's okay. It's a real pleasure to introduce Matthew. He doesn't really need an introduction, as we can hear. People know him. He's been a member at NEF for many years. Matthew is, I understand, American-born, did an MA in Oxford in history, lived in Leeds, later came to Hendon, was an active member at NEF, and since making Aliyah, Matthew has taken over the custody of Koren, and it's been a great pleasure for us to watch Koren as it goes from strength to strength under Matthew's custody. Matthew will speak. There'll be an opportunity for Q&A at the end. And with that, I give you Matthew.
Well, I suppose I should start with, this is all too close. I suppose I should start with the appropriate apologies, thanks, and observation that me speaking to everybody here from there is clearly a point that God does have a very good sense of humor. The apologies are really, if I do speak in first person, that's mistaken. Koren has an excellent team of consummate professionals, and I'm delighted to have them on the team. And my thanks is, sometimes you just keep working at a job and you just take, it's rare that you have the opportunity to just reflect on where you've been and where you're coming from and where you're going. You'd be surprised how little that's done. So let me, Gary, you asked that I talk about how I became involved with Koren and what we're doing now and where we're going. So if that is the correct agenda, as you know, I lived in England for over 20 years, 8 years in Hendon. We made Aliyah in '99. And those of you who know me, I was pretty much always on a plane somewhere. And I was a confirmed bookaholic. That's before I met Helen and Jeremy, when I became an alcoholic. And when I thank you, Jeremy. Now, and I wanted to go very much into the book business, which is something I was going to do as a sort of a retirement project. Started a small press called Toby. We did some fiction. We did Yehuda Avner's The Prime Minister. We did quite a number of very good books. But it became very, very frustrating to be in the trade book business. It's book to book to book. And what we found is if we publish probably about 100 books over the course of 3 or 5 years, 90 do badly. It's always the publisher's fault. 5 do okay and 5 do great. And of those 10 that do well, they say, thank you very much for publishing me, and they go on to Random House, they go on to Hodder, they go on to another brand. And I found myself very, very frustrated. At the same time, Jerusalem being a small town, I had heard that Koren could be available for acquisition. Now, at the time, let me just go back and talk about Koren. Koren was founded in the 1960s, the early 1960s, by Eliyahu Koren. He was part of that generation of Israel that really created the state, and it was his obsession. It was his obsession to produce the first Jewish edited, Jewish produced Bible, Tanakh, in literally 1,000 years. What do I mean by that? From the time of the late Middle Ages, especially when printing came into being, all the master texts of the Hebrew Tanakh were controlled by the church. And what Koren did is he went back to what was then the oldest edition of the Hebrew Tanakh edited by Jews. That was the Leningrad Codex. This is before the Aram Soba came out of Aleppo, and put together a team of scholars and published the Tanakh in with thousands and thousands of corrections. This came out in the early 60s, and the company was doing the Tanakh. In the 70s and 80s, they came out with some Sidurim and Machzorim, but really that's all the company did. So it had a very, very restricted range. But when I saw it, it actually pressed all my buttons. I'm a wannabe academic, the standards that were applied to all Koren titles back then were really of the highest standards. Design was extremely important. The man was so obsessive that he designed his own fonts for the Sidur and for the Tanakh. It was a Zionist enterprise. All those buttons were pressed. And I thought, maybe I can do something with this. Because in parallel, over the years that I was in London, Renee and I got to meet Rabbi Sachs. We knew he had just come out with a new edition of the Sidur for the United Synagogue, and that he was looking to publish it outside the UK. But I didn't feel that the company had started, Toby, was a good platform from such. So what we did was we acquired the company. It was very small. It was 3 people. And we started to do everything over. And the first range of projects that we came out with was the Sidur by Rabbi Sachs, which has now become incredibly popular, incredibly well-known throughout the English-speaking world, from Australia, throughout the United States and Canada. And I think we're getting some copies into the UK under the radar. And the Sidur begat the Machzorim series, which, in the UK, which with the Lee families and the Ostros, we were able to bring out these both in Ashkenaz, Sfard, and Nusach Anglia, all 3. And that project, that whole area of tefillah continues to grow. We've just come out with our new Spanish Sidur. We're going to press next week with the official Sidur for the German community, the Orthodox German community, the ORD. We're working on a new Sidur for the Syrian community, for the Norwegian community, for the Hungarian community. They're all coming on because what our Sidur series with Rabbi Sachs's leadership is an intelligent, it's an eloquent approach to tefillah, which appeals to, I guess, the intellect as much as the soul. That range continues to grow. The second area that we looked at was what became Magid Books. We developed Magid as a separate imprint from Koren on the basis that some people love Rabbi Sachs, some people dislike Rabbi Sachs. We publish the works of 2 rabbis, Avi Weiss on the left and Mordechai Villig on the right. They're both first cousins, and they're both on the spectrum of, on either spectrum of orthodoxy. We felt it would be better to publish books of opinion under a separate imprint from Tanakh, from Koren. And the third area was very soon after I'd taken over, we were approached by the Steinsaltz organization. Many Steinsaltz, who was the late rabbi's son, said, look, we've been publishing for 40 years. We've been publishing badly for 40 years. We want to revive the Hebrew edition, but we really want to do the New English edition. And together, we came together and we recreated the Israeli program. And as you know, the new Koren Talmud Bavli, which we brought out the first volume, and we had no idea how the hell we were going to do it. Fortunately, Sue and Leo Noe came through, and we're very pleased to be publishing we have completed the Noe edition of the Koren Talmud Bavli. It is a wonderful work. Those who have used it love it. Those who haven't looked at it, well, I don't know. You don't know what you're missing. it's a tremendous achievement, and I think we're bringing many thousands more that could not access the traditional Haredi approach to Talmud into it. So that's the overview of where we come so far. But now we're looking at what we want to achieve. You know, we're taking a 10-year point. We're taking a 10-year view. The first decade of what we've achieved at Koren, I think, has been good. We also achieved an extraordinary series of educational Sidurim. It's all part of our Sidur series for what we call the children's, the youth, the middle school, and the senior high school editions of Sidurim in Tuna Sachim, which enable children and the teachers of these children to learn why we say what we say, not just to bend here and bow there, but to understand why we're saying what we say in tefillah. And this has been to the point where in just from a standing base of zero, we're selling something 30, 40,000 a year of these Sidurim to schools throughout South Africa, Australia, and North America that are that have bought into the program, and we're literally changing the way that children are davening. We've worked with the OU with their Yachad program for those disabilities, those with disabilities, and we brought out Sidurim for them. And we're growing. But the next area that we want to look at, the next area we really want to look at is Tanakh. We have an unfortunate situation in the Jewish English-speaking world of Tanakh illiteracy. If you're not affiliated, and I guess I tend to speak more about the United States than about the UK, so you'll forgive me. We have a situation of gross illiteracy. The 90% of conservative reform families, their children simply don't know the Tanakh. They don't open it. Haredim, well, real men do Talmud, do Gemara. You know, modern Orthodox, well, we're a bit better, but we're not where we should be. So we are starting a series of projects that will completely change the way we're doing things. The first and the cornerstone of this is the new translation that we'll be coming out with of the Tanakh in the spring of 21. We'll be launching, we're going to press in November, and we're proposing a Sukkot launch, a pre-Sukkot launch. There will be several editions, of course, but this will be an entirely new Tanakh. Rabbi Sachs translated the Chumash, and the other books were done by a series of about 40, 50 translators, editors, scholars, designers. It's a fabulous work. It's a fabulous work. I'm reading it. It's a pleasure. This is not the Sachs Chumash. I'll talk about that in a moment. The Tanakh, we put together the translator team with two qualifications. Number one, they have to know Tanakh, and number two, they have to write well, because eloquence in getting across the Tanakh is of critical importance. We want Jews to read the book with pleasure, with love. There have been several recent translations, you know, the Robert Alter and the other translations, but these are academic works. They're not done with love. You know, you have a translator like Alter who hates David HaMelech, and it comes through in the translation. Well, we don't have that baggage. We accept the Tanakh at face value. So whether you're reading the Torah that's translated by Rav Sachs, if you're reading the Yirmiyahu, by Rav Weinreb, or the rest of the series, you will be, I think, pleasantly surprised how well and how accessible it reads. We've done something else. We have, again, using, unlike other translations, whilst we're faithful to the text, we are translating proper names. We are transliterating proper names. It will not be Moses and Abraham and Joseph. It will be Moshe, Avraham, Yosef. I think we're doing this, well, we are doing this for positive reasons and negative reasons. First, you have a name. Names mean things, and when you translate, you can't help but translate into a cultural context. So let me just use a minor example, but it's a good example. You know, when you read in Shmuel about the death of Eli and his sons who were killed, and the death of the grandfather, the death of the sons pushes Eli's daughter-in-law into giving birth, and her son is born, and he's called Ichabod. Now, when it's always translated into English as Ichabod, and within the American context, you know, it's the one people think of the Washington Irving short story, or the Disney version of that, of Ichabod Crane. Nobody thinks what Ichabod means, and it means without honor. His disgraced grandfather, his disgraced parents, his mother gives birth, and here's a child that is born without honor. If you just translate Ichabod, you don't get that. We're trying to get the names to meet the realization that when you use names, they're used for, it's nothing is by chance. The names are important. You know, Moshe taking out of the river. It's also for negative reasons. You know, do we talk about Joe Green, the Italian songwriter, or Giuseppe Verdi, the opera composer? You know, I think Hebrew names deserve that same kavod. This will be followed. So this is coming out in several editions, with Rashi Onkelos, without Rashi Onkelos, Hebrew English. That'll be coming out throughout the 2021 calendar year. Rabbi Sachs is working very hard now on the Chumash, and the Chumash will be coming out in the spring, middle of 2022. Again, it's exceptional. Rabbi Sachs is doing an entirely new commentary for us. It's simply not a bunch of old CNCs that are being recycled. Not at all. He's working very, very hard. We have a staff here in Israel that's working with him on a daily basis. Ruvain Ziegler and Shai Finkelstein, especially. They'll be reviewed also by Diane Binstock and David Fry. It will be the most important Chumash for the next 100 years. We are honored to be publishing it. We will be thrilled to be selling it. So those two are the cornerstones of what we're doing. Now, based on that, we have 3 other projects in the Tanakh world we're working on. One is, as part of our education series, we are doing a series of Chumash, the 5-volume, for high school students. We're, you know, with Rashi, learning the Meforshim, learning how to interpret. It's called the it's the Lev Ladat, right? The Lev Ladat series. It's being sponsored by the Nagel family out of Los Angeles. That'll be coming out. The first volume will be Shmot, which will be coming out in February. Gary, if I could ask you to put on the LOI picture. You have the picture of the LOI there? Yeah, that's the Talmud, more Talmud, and more Talmud. And here's the LOI. This is a series. Yeah, back, slow, back, reverse, back. That's it. This is a series. That's it. The first volume has come out at Shmot. It came out last year. The second volume will be Shmuel Aleph and Beit. That'll be coming out in February. What we're doing here is we're looking at the Tanakh through the eyes of contemporary readers, not contemporary us, contemporary at the time. I mean, who was the first person? Who were the first people to listen to Shmot? It was a bunch of runaway slaves, runaway Hebrew slaves who were steeped for generations in Egyptian culture. So what we're doing is let me tell you what we're not doing. What we're not doing is we're not saying, well, there was Ramses who was the Pharaoh, and they went this way, and this is how we're proving that. We're not doing any of that stuff. What we're doing is we are putting the cultural context of the text and putting it so that, number one, it actually reinforces this could only have been written by people who understood Egyptian culture, which again re-emphasizes the actuality of the events. But it also brings us new understanding. Let me give you two examples. Example number one from Shmot. What's so terrible about the ninth plague? It's the plagues are supposed to be getting worse and worse and worse. And the ninth plague, the penultimate plague before the killing of the firstborn, it's dark. What's so terrible about bumbling around in the dark? Well, what you don't realize is that you must understand Egyptian theology. Every night when the sun goes down, Ra, the sun god, dies. He gets onto a boat. This is on every wall painting throughout ancient Egypt. It's lavishly illustrated in the book. And he goes on the spark and goes through a process of rebirth. So when that he is reborn the following morning, the sun comes up. Now, stability was the most important thing to the Egyptian empire. What's happening? Before God kills the firstborn, God is killing the gods of Egypt. He's scaring the bejesus out of the Egyptians. The terror that is imposed by this is phenomenal. That's why it's the ninth plague. And you don't get that if you just read Meforshim. You have to understand the Egyptian mythology to understand why it is so powerful of a message. Let me give you another example, which comes from a later volume. We read in the passage of the spies. We all know the story. Spies go off. They come back. The land looks good, but oh my God, they're going to kill us. Let's go back to Egypt. Why'd you bring us here? The usual, complaining that the Bnei Israel love to do. And then God, kills a number in the plague, and Moshe intervenes, and they're forgiven. And how does the parsha end? The parsha ends with tzitzit, the mitzvah of tzitzit. What does tzitzit have to do with the spies? Again, let's look at the Egyptian context. In ancient Egypt, and again, you can see this throughout wall paintings everywhere. In ancient Egypt, tzitzit strings were kind of like what epaulets are in the army. In other words, it's a sign of rank, and only the high Egyptian nobility, only the sons of Paro were allowed to wear tzitzit. So when God is having wiped out so many, he comes back and he says, okay, you are my children, you are royalty. Despite what you have done, I will forgive you, and so you don't do this again. You're wearing tzitzit. You are royalty because you're the children of God. It's so much more powerful. It's so much more logical. This is what we're trying to get across in this Tanakh, the land of Israel. It'll eventually be about 13 volumes. Volume 2, like I said, is going to press in November for a February launch. That's Shmuel. After that, I think we're doing Yirmiyahu or Vayikra. I'm not sure which one we're doing first. And this is another way of approaching Torah education. Another project that we're doing, and Gary, if I could ask you now to lower it down to the next slide, is what we're calling the Koren Mikrot Haderot. This has a funny story. I was having breakfast with Marvin Heyer from Los Angeles, and he was going on because he was very upset that his teacher, one of his teachers, Rav Aaron Cutler, nobody studied his comments about the Parsha. And also, at that time, it hadn't come out yet. Very few people studied Rav Soloveitchik on the Parsha. At that same time, I had been reading some Philo. And I was saying that, nobody really reads Philo. And of course, Nechama Leibowitz, well, she's treif, she's a woman. All this stuff. And it just struck us that if you look at a Mikra Gedolot, it covers a period of maybe 300 years. And the many, many editions that are out there, some are prettier, some are better printed, some are worse printed. They're all the same old, same old. What we are trying to do in this is to get across 2,000 years of biblical commentary. This is, in a way, this is completely the opposite of the Tanakh, the Koren land of Israel. What we're trying to get across is, again, using the Rabbi Sachs's translation, we're getting across 2,000 years. How are we doing it? When you open the book, Gary, can I just ask you to raise it up a little bit? When you open it from, thank you. When you open it from the Hebrew side, what you get is the weekly Parsha, the Koren text and the new Sachs translation down here on the lower right. And you have a completely new Rashi. This is a new Rashi based on the manuscripts from Munich, the unexpurgated edition. It's all there. And this is also in a new translation that meshes, of course, with the translation by Rabbi Sachs. They're both fluid, they're both great. And for people like me, I'm a BT, I never studied Rashi. It's going to be the best way of following the Rashi in Shul. When you open it from the English-speaking side, you get something completely different. You get 4 sections, because it's difficult to get this in 2,000 years into one section. What we have is we call the ancient, it's the ancients, or which we call the time of the sages. It's the classic commentators. It's what we call confronting modernity, and a series of essays on Drash. So, for example, what you see is in confronting modernity, the 19th and 20th century writers. And the good news is you have to be dead to be in here, so that takes care of all the contemporary rabbis. Good. The problems confronting, let's say, Raphael Shimshon Hirsch, compare that, he's talking to a 19th century audience that is assimilating. And he's talking to, and you read Philo from the first section, and he's talking to a first century Alexandrian Greek community that is integrating. The 19th, 20th century rabbis, the 20th century rabbis had to do with the Holocaust. These things, the first century rabbis had to deal with the destruction of the temple and the rise of Christianity, and how were they going to cope? Their circumstances dictated to a very large degree how they saw the world, and this comes across in their commentary. So one year you may want to go to, one year you might want to go through the ancients because nobody amongst you, I bet, has read Sadiga On or the Mechilta or Philo on the Parsha. One year you may want to go through confronting modernity and read, the 19th and 20th century commentators. So in other words, unlike what we're doing is giving it a completely new look, a new approach to Chumash. The final project that we're working on, for which we seek funding at this point, is, and this was supported by the individual volumes are being supported, but the project is being supported by the Rohr family of New York. What we are doing, one more project we're doing is education. Just as we had the 4 levels of Sidur learning. We are looking at a 4-level series. The 4th one is already in progress of Tanakh education, Chumash and Tanakh education. So what we're trying to do, and this goes back directly to those original 3 principles that pressed those buttons of mine about a dozen years ago. You know, the standard of academic approach to what we're doing is unsurpassed. No other publisher is reaching the kind of levels of textual accuracy that we are, of general accuracy. We're obsessive compulsive. If you drew a line, if you drew a dot in my office and made a 20-mile radius, the amount of Anglo talent in the Jerusalem area is unbelievable. You know, from Beit Shemesh to Modi'in to Ma'ale Adumim to Gush. It's phenomenal. We're Zionist. What we're doing could not be done anywhere else, especially the land of Israel. Design, I think you've seen everything we do is beautiful, and it's not beautiful just to be cute. It's beautiful because the act of learning has to be accompanied by beauty. It truly is a hidur mitzvah. But the other aspect that we're bringing in is something that I say that, you know, we're bringing Rav Sachs into Hebrew. We're bringing Rav Sabato and Benny Lau into English. We're trying to build bridges. We're trying to build bridges between the Hebrew world and the English world, and the Spanish world now too. We're starting to publish in Spanish. There's too much alienation. Again, America is going in a very ugly and a bad direction. The Jewish community is going in a very ugly and bad and alienated direction. We're trying, for the life of us, to build bridges and to bring the wisdom back and forth. I don't know if we'll succeed, but you know, we can never stop. I think our next 10, 20 years is charted out. And to that end, again, I think God's got a pretty good sense of humor that he's putting me in charge of this thing. So thank you. Thank you for listening. I apologize for droning on too much. You must be tired of my voice. I am. And Gary, I can open the floor to questions.
That would be great. My suggestion is for questions is either, if you'd like to ask a question directly, unmute yourselves, ask the question, go back onto mute, or alternatively, you're welcome to put something in the chat box. Whilst people may be thinking about questions, I'm wondering whether Koren has any plans for online, what the plans are, and we know there is also a relationship already with Sefaria, and how you see that developing.
So you're asking really about the digital world?
Yeah.
Look, we don't know. We've developed an expertise in Homer. Yes, we've worked with Sefaria on the Noe Talmud. Yes, we do a project here and a project there. Sefaria is one of them. You know, I know Daniel Septimus and Brett quite well. They're good guys. They're really good guys. That is one of the platforms. When we work with, I'm sorry, I didn't bring pictures of our schools project for Sidurim. Every school has a different. Every school. One thing I didn't talk about. Any schmuck can print a book. That's not what we do. We've got 10 sales guys, full employees, covering, you know, getting our stuff into schools and shuls all over the world. Now, our institutional sales force that covers schools and shuls and yeshivot has been battered this year by the COVID virus. It's starting to come back now. You know, the early shoots of redemption are coming back. But we work with schools. So, for example, one of the lead schools in North America is the Hill Harcum School in Los Angeles, and they have their own system for audiovisual and digital. So we work with them on their system. We provide the home material, they provide the system. So we cannot keep up on, we do not want to lock ourselves into any one technology, nor are we competent to actually develop our own technologies. It's too much, there's too many, and we're happy to work with pretty much anybody. You know.
A moment for any questions.
I put it in the chat, but
in
why
the chat
is
box?
Yeah, but why is the Hebrew and the English on the pages the opposite way round to we're used to with
no, I think
no,
you want to rephrase that question. You say, why is everybody wrong and we're right? If you look at the way Hebrew works, left to right, the natural flow is that way. That's the way. If you go back to the early incanabula printers, that's how they were all done like that. It's the logical way. When you look at a magazine, what's the most expensive page in page 3? You know, magazine on the right. In English, is on the right. Logically, Hebrew is on the left. We have given preeminence to Hebrew on the left because that is how you read it. When you're reading it, it's kind of reading it backwards, you know, like let's say in Israel, like, you know, like this. If you're reading it, and if you look at my favorite page in the Siddur is the Baruch Shamar page. You know, look at it, it fans out. If that line break, which is very important to Koren, were the other way around, it would be a huge gaping hole in the middle, and you couldn't associate that line to that line. By having the English flow this way and the Hebrew flow that way, you can see the lines. And it's functional and it's beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Gary, can I ask a question?
Go for it.
It's Moishi here. Matthew, first of all, thank you so much.
Where are you, Moishi?
Moishi Shatskas.
Yeah, I don't see you. Okay.
I've got 2 devices on, so
okay.
Hang on. Start video. Here we go.
Is that the face that launched 1,000 ships?
First of all, on behalf of the whole community, I'd like to thank you so much for speaking to us today. Tonight's fascinating and everything you're doing is wonderful. But I just wanted to ask an actual question on something that I remember. I can see Michael Pollock is with us this evening. I think you're still there, Michael?
I see him.
Yes. I remember many years ago, Michael gave a shir in there, and he mentioned, I assume they're not very much your rivals at all, but they do a vaguely similar thing, which is the Art Scroll publications. I remember Michael speaking, Mike, you probably remember the actual conversation, but I remember you speaking in there about a conversation you had with Rabbi Nosson Sherman. And you brought up a few questions that you had on various opinions that they'd given in either translation or pshat in the Gemara, wherever it was. And his answer to you was that I'm in the Emunah business, not the MS business. I think it was that more or less.
I've actually never met Nosson Sherman, but it was an interview that was published. So I needed to say that. He said, right, I'm in the Yeras Shamayim business.
And not the MS business.
Well, not the Lashon Hara.
Right. Okay. Now the reason why I'm bringing this up is because Matthew, I'm interested to hear, because you mentioned earlier that you separated out the opinion publications that you're doing from the Meforshim or wherever it might be. I was wondering if that was at the back of your mind when you took on this project right at the beginning.
No. Let me say, I have no problem. You know, I'm not scared. Maybe I'm ignorant, but I'm just simply not scared. I don't think you have to bend the truth, mistranslate, you know, tweak the interpretations to be confident in your Judaism. I don't have to translate Moshe and Aaron in Shir Hashirim. You know, you don't have to do that. It's not necessary. We don't have to walk around with, you know, they say you have to look over your right shoulder, you know, out of fear. And no, we Dafka did it for, you know, the Magid, keeping Magid separate from Koren, it's like the world's worst kept secret. I mean, you know, it's the same website, same everything. We're not pretending. We're not pretending. What I do take issue with the Haredi world is taking midrash in lieu of pshat, of taking the emes of midrash instead of what is written. We don't have to be afraid. That's why I love the Land of Israel Tanakh, because it's illuminating and bringing all these other contextual, cultural references. It's not by any means undermining our faith. It's strengthening our faith.
Sorry, Joe. Just
Matthew, a question in the chat box, which is about the excellent Rabbi Laus series, The Sages. Is the fifth book produced, and will it be translated into English?
Great question. Glad you asked. I think it's being worked on. Ilana Kirshen took a couple years off because she's the best translator. She took a couple of years off to have a bunch of babies and her own book. And I think she's back on it now. I don't have the answer. I'll get back to Gary.
Okay. Any further questions?
In which case, yeah.
So mistranslation has a long heritage, starting with the Septuagint.
Thank you. First, Matthew, can I say thank you so much for sharing your vision and excitement with us. It's great to hear what's infused you and what you're doing, and even more what is still yet to come. Just to talk about what the previous subject that I think Chairman Mo kicked off about mistranslation. I mean, mistranslation does have a long history in Judaism. We starting with the Septuagint, where you translate things differently. Admittedly, that might well be for a different audience, but translating with your audience in mind has a long tradition. I like your approach personally, but
let's just say that you know the expression "fools rush in where angels dare not tread." That's the translation. It took us to areas that we never thought of, but it's fraught. It's fraught.
Matthew, the next question is, with the Land of Israel project, how do you choose which volumes to publish first?
That was actually easy. That was actually easy. We completed the translation of Shemot first. Rabbi Sachs did Bereshit. He had to make a number of changes. He kept going, came back to it later. So Shemot was done first. So we did Shemot first. And then we picked up Shmuel as the next volume. We'll probably go back to the Chumash for the next volume, the third volume, because that was the first translation that was done. We also started the Koren Mikra Hadarot, also with Shemot. You know, those 10 volumes will be out by the middle of next year.
Brilliant, thank you. Any further questions? I'd like to thank Matthew for a really illuminating talk. It's really surpassed what were very high expectations anyhow. And a few of the key themes you mentioned on the very high academic standard, the Zionist Land of Israel approach, the Hiddur mitzvah of something that's really beautiful to hold in your hands, and the building of bridges, translating people into other languages. I'd like to thank you massively for what's really been great. Really wish you continue to go from strength to strength.
And I couldn't have done it without belonging to Nair.
I didn't know that schmoozing was a required part.
It's part of publishing. And I will say this, although I don't miss going to shul a lot, but I do miss sitting with Michael and Peter. And not getting a lot of davening done.
Thank you very much, and wish you a good evening.
Take care, Gary. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Matthew.
And whoever wishes is welcome to stay online.
All the best, Matthew.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah.
Yishar
Bye. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.